If you're planning to throw away your old set of speakers, a small microchip may change your mind.
Well, this project here basically improves the performance of loudspeakers. You can get a $50 loudspeaker to sound like a $500 loudspeaker.
The digital acoustic equaliser is just one of more than 40 innovative projects on display at Newcastle University. Representing the ideas of final year electrical and computer engineering students, the works are being assessed for technical merit.
This is a 3D laser imaging system and it's basically low cost. You can put an image on there, it'll scan it and then convert it to a three-dimensional model for the computer. Industries can use it for guidance of robotic arms to pick up the object. Once it's in there, the whole system knows about it.
A proximity safety detector sounds an alarm if something comes too close to power lines. And there's this robotic mouse, designed to move around by itself.
Oh, it can be used for many types of application, remote sensing, building vehicles in dangerous situations which need to navigate unknown territory, that sort of thing. There's a lot of application for this sort of project.
It's the first time the engineering department has publicly displayed the students' projects. While concentrating on innovation rather than product development, the university says there's no doubt some of the ideas will open up a number of commercial possibilities. Melinda Smith, NBN News.
He must be one of the tallest trot drivers in the country, and probably the slowest. Michael Johnson keeping a tight rein on Cool Avian, the favourite for the testimonial race to be held in his honour on Saturday.
Mate, absolutely fantastic. First time I've ever done it, and I really did enjoy it, and I'd do it again any time.
And surprisingly, for a man who's known for his long shots, he's opted for the favourite in the main race.
It was a fantastic horse. That's the favourite in race 5 on Saturday night, and a lot of power in that horse, and I think I know where I'm going to put my money.
He moved from the basketball court to the trotting track to promote the last fundraiser in his testimonial year. It could also prove to be Johnson's farewell after 14 seasons in the NBL. His career including 364 games for the Falcons and a stint in the green and gold of his country.
Undecided yet. I certainly won't be taking harness racing up for a living, but we'll just decide in a couple of months and see how I feel and see what's going on.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Around 200 non-teaching staff attended a debriefing session at City Hall after details of the proposed new structure were released today. Uncertainty has surrounded their jobs since the state government announced its education reforms 2 months ago. Forecasting massive job losses, the Education Minister claimed the changes would save taxpayers around $17 million a year. Demanding a say in the restructure and arguing schools would suffer from a lack of support, the PSA imposed a number of work bans.
This government had promised to be a consultative and open government, and they'd failed at the first hurdle as far as we're concerned in education.
The Hunter has been split into 4 new districts headed by a state office. The PSA says it believes 30 non-teaching jobs have gone, but the department sees it differently.
The drift in the public service is about 10, and we have got an increase in the teaching service positions. So overall, I think we have approximately the same employment pattern.
Most employees will have to reapply for the 135 positions. The PSA says the issue isn't over yet. It's threatened more industrial action if the Education Department fails to honour its promise to continue negotiations.
If that agreement isn't honoured by the department, it won't take much to reimpose the bans, and it'll take even less to escalate those bans.
Melinda Smith, NBN News. It was hailed as the key to the CBD's problems, a $7 million facelift for Newcastle Shopping Mall. The ambitious plans include major landscape works, removing the overhead walkway to the foreshore, as well as demolishing the escalators and setting up markets and kiosks. A crucial component involves building 2 pedestrian level crossings over the rail line.
The whole design for the mall work is predicated upon attractive pedestrian crossings at grade across the railway line linking the foreshore to the mall.
The Department of Transport is carrying out a feasibility study of the crossings as well as the proposed CBD transport terminal planned for Civic Station.
That study is to be completed by the 8th of December, and then Council will know where it stands in respect of the at-grade crossings and the mall plan.
If the feasibility study supports the level crossings, redevelopment work could begin as early as next year. If it doesn't, it's back to the drawing board.
If those crossings can't be put in place, the landscape architects will have to redesign a major part of their current plan.
The latest figures aren't looking good for the local economy.
We were seeing fairly steady growth in employment throughout 1994 and the first half of 1995. Since then, employment growth has certainly stopped.
Unemployment rates for September jumped 2% on August, up to 11.2%. That's nearly 4% higher than the state average. An additional 4,000 people are looking for work in the Hunter region. Economists say it's only a month of bad figures and it's not crisis time yet. But trends aren't looking good with jobs to go in the public service and school leavers about to hit the streets.
The labour force situation is not going to be as positive as it has been over the last 12 months, which is not necessarily good news for people looking for work.
Also, figures for the housing sector have turned down, and that's a leading indicator that the economy is tightening. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The sight of a Hercules aircraft flying in low over the sea could mean salvation for a stricken sailor. RAAF personnel and members of the New South Wales Water Police have distinguished themselves with their courage and skill in taking on the worst sea conditions and, if humanly possible, bringing shipwrecked sailors safely back to land.
When a vessel is in distress at sea, that if the RAAF is called upon, they can drop these containers of life-saving equipment on board so the vessel can get to it, or the occupants of the vessel can get to it, and might save their lives.
Flares are dropped, then dummy rescue canisters, which in a real emergency would contain rafts and survival rations. The idea is to get them as close to a disabled vessel as possible, then let the wind and the waves push them in the right direction. Even on a calm day, it can be a tricky operation. This is in ideal conditions. The training, it can be a different matter once you're out there, though.
That's correct, yes. It's beautiful out there today. There's no swell or nothing, but in the days when they've got to go out there, as you say, it's atrocious conditions, big seas.
Australia has a high number of asthma sufferers, and according to the National Health and Research Council, about 750 people die needlessly from the condition each year. The Pharmacy Board and Pharmaceutical Society of New South Wales are supporting a plan to have the asthma card implemented statewide and then around Australia.
The asthma card's designed to allow pharmacists to counsel patients about their asthma and in particular their asthma medications. And it's also designed, and very importantly designed, to monitor a patient's use of what are known as reliever medications. Now, reliever medications are things like Ventolin, because if a patient is relying too heavily on Ventolin, or they're finding that they're needing to increase their dose of Ventolin, it's a sure sign their asthma is not well controlled. They need to go and see their doctor. They need to have further asthma management.
The card is not compulsory, but it's a safety backstop. It'll be launched throughout northern New South Wales later this month and in metropolitan areas early next year.
And I stress it's not there to hassle people. It's not a big brother thing. It is there purely to help people better understand their asthma.
The Breakers were looking for a good start after backing up from a 2-0 loss against Marconi, but it was West Adelaide who got off on the right foot from the boot of Peter Sekinus. But the Breakers were anything but shell-shocked, hitting back minutes later. Clayton Zane unselfishly crossing to Jason Bennett for the equaliser. The Breakers got the better of the second half but failed to convert chances into goals. The crowd of more than 4,000 people were on the edge of their seats until the end, with Zane missing a chance in the last minute. Coach John Cosmina was happy with the draw. He says the Breakers continue to get better every game as their match fitness improves. The Breakers will travel to Brisbane on Saturday for their next game against a fresh strikers outfit. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Some of tomorrow's competitors brave the elements at Newcastle Beach, finalising preparations for the second round of the series. But today it was the surfboats' turn, with some of the country's best crews battling the messy, erratic conditions whipped up by a strong southerly. As usual, some had more luck than others in conquering the whitewater in the heats. There were more spills in the semi-finals, but these crews escaped lightly. The North Narrabeen boats split in half earlier in the day, while 2 oarsmen from the Mooloolaba Club were taken to hospital, one with a suspected broken arm, the other with back injuries. Torquay, Metropolitan, Caloundra, Manly and North Cronulla all progressed to the final, the latter starting favourite after taking out the opening round of the series.
It was, according to police, a well-planned and executed robbery which netted the thieves the weekend's takings from one of the busiest clubs on the Central Coast. At 3 o'clock this morning, 3 men cut their way through a perimeter fence at the Doyleson RSL Club on the Pacific Highway. At gunpoint, they forced an employee who was in the beer garden into the club where 2 other cleaners were working.
Well, I was out there cleaning the poker machines out, and all of a sudden this fella come around from the side of the machines with a sawn-off shotgun and just pointed straight to me head.
I was in the bistro doing the tables and had my back to the door, and he just come up behind me and said, "Excuse me, darling." And I just turned around and seen him there and just screamed.
The 3 cleaners were gagged, had their hands taped together and were ordered to lie on the floor. While one of the men ransacked the poker machines, 2 others used a sledgehammer to break into the safe. In 20 minutes, they had smashed a large hole through the double brick wall. Although the cleaners were shaken by the ordeal, at no time was anyone hurt.
Oh yeah, they were very well mannered, they were very polite. They didn't hurt us or nothing.
The club is regularly patrolled by a security company, but the thieves had that covered as well. When the security guard came to check on the cleaners, he left with the impression that they were fine and everything was normal.
He stood to the side with a gun and got me to wave to the security guard to say that we were all right, and then he took me back and tied me back up.
The men took their time in the club, fleeing close to daybreak in a car stolen from one of the cleaners. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
St Francis Xavier College at Hamilton has the largest number of HSC candidates in the state, with 476 students sitting for examinations. The first subjects to be tested were studies of religion and drama, and pupils arrived early to do some last-minute revision.
Many of the students here are under pressure, under stress, but I think that the students here are well prepared.
While students were expectedly nervous, teachers too were on tenterhooks, hoping they'd done enough to prepare their classes.
A little bit anxious for the students.
This afternoon, the first day of the month-long exam period was over. Teachers at St Francis Xavier's were on hand to counsel students after the Studies in Religion exam, but most seemed happy with the paper.
How did you feel going into the exam? Were you nervous?
Nervous at the start, but the jitters went away as soon as I read the paper.
Well, I'd done the right amount of study, so I was fairly confident, and it turned out pretty easy, so I'm happy about it.
So I was well prepared for it, so I'm pretty happy.
Anne Lewis, NBN News. From January next year, the parents of 250 students who travel to school on the Toronto bus service will have to pay up to $320 a year in fares, a service which up until this year was free. The proposed increase is a result of the state government's axing of free bus travel for students living less than 2 kilometres from their schools.
But they'll have to pay between $5 and $8 a week for bus fares. If they don't choose to do that, then operators are going to lose a lot of money, and that will mean that they'll have to look at the levels of service that they currently provide.
Roger Hertogs from the Newcastle and Hunter Bus and Coach Association says the changes will not only affect students, but could mean an end to some bus services in rural areas because they won't be financially viable.
The new criteria is 2 kilometres radial distance with no allowing walking distance. So therefore, a small town that's only 2 kilometres from one side to the other could have all its bus services wiped out.
The Bus and Coach Association says it understands the government's reasons for the changes, but says it should be charging students who don't attend their nearest schools.
City Rail's newest station was officially opened today, costing $3.25 million. It has a 24-hour surveillance system, a lift and wheelchair access. However, the cement paths end some metres from the station, turning into a dirt track on either side.
A goat track at the moment, I'd call it, on either side, and it certainly does need improving.
The station is flanked on one side by Warrabrook residential development and the university on the other. The university says it will spend $850,000 on a road, emergency telephones and a separate pedestrian path, but they won't be ready until next year.
We took the decision it was better to do it properly and have it all ready for the start of our next academic year in 1996. It's only a couple of months to wait, and it gives a much better facility for our students and staff.
Local member John Price agrees the access is poor, but has defended the situation.
Whilst at the moment the access is rugged, it's still accessible, and both sides have agreed that they will improve it soon.
Newcastle's fruit market came to a standstill this morning for the annual auction of the first season cherries. The opening bid, $1,000. 3 fruit shop owners bid, with one dropping out around the $4,000 mark. Frank Frasca from Charlestown Square's Fruit Affair was the final bid, buying the box of cherries for $8,000.
Do you think you got carried away?
You know me, I do everything with a passion. Yes, I probably did get carried away. I certainly went higher than I expected to.
The proceeds will be donated to the Hunter Region's Rescue Chopper. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The 15-year-old girl lived in this Cook's Place house with several other teenagers. At 10 o'clock last night, neighbours heard her screaming and rushed outside.
She was crying on my front step and she's singing out my back, and I come out and opened the door and she just pushed her way in and she had the knife hanging out of her back.
The teenager was taken to Manning Base Hospital where her condition was stabilised. 5 hours later, she was transferred to Newcastle, the knife still embedded in her back. While she was undergoing treatment in the intensive care unit of John Hunter Hospital, a 12-year-old girl was appearing in Newcastle Children's Court on 5 charges, including attempted murder. The court heard the child was remorseful for what happened and realised the seriousness of the charges. Bail was applied for, but Magistrate Warren Cook ordered that the girl be kept in custody, saying he did not know how a custodial sentence could be avoided if the child was found guilty. He went on to say, the allegations are very serious indeed. If they prove to become fact, it is a fairly premeditated thing. It's not as though it was in the heat of the moment. The court was also told the victim's family has expressed grave fears for their safety if the 12-year-old is returned to Taree. The girl will face court again next week. The 15-year-old remains in a satisfactory condition. Jodie McKay, NBN News. Teresa Taylor has lived in this Department of Housing building in McLaughlin Street, Argenton for 10 years. But today she was packing up and moving out. She discovered on Friday that her 2.5-year-old daughter Ashley has a blood lead level of 26. The acceptable level is 10. Her doctor told her to leave straight away.
It's not the nicest feeling having to move on the spur of the moment, not even having a chance to get anything organised, and pulling my son out of school and all of that.
Teresa's house is around 1 kilometre from the Pasminco lead smelter and is thought to be outside the risk area. The Department of Health will carry out tests in the house and in the yard to determine whether the lead is industry-related or perhaps from another source like lead-based paint. Little Ashley spends up to 20 hours a week at a childcare facility at Belmont, so that too will have to be taken into consideration. It's a concern, though, for her mother, who knows that continued exposure to lead can impair a child's mental development.
I'm not prepared to take that risk, not with a perfectly healthy 2-year-old child.
As one of the so-called hard men in politics, Wilson Ironbar Tuckey has been very quiet of late.
So I'm getting a bit older and a bit more mature.
Mr Tuckey was at the Williamtown RAF base near Newcastle today campaigning for the upcoming federal election, which he believes will be in late March. As the Shadow Defence Minister, the base was familiar territory, but it's also in the delicate electorate of Paterson. The Coalition needs a 3.4% swing to win the seat from Labor. The Liberals are trying to shake off claims from the Prime Minister that they'll bring back the GST and cut wages for workers.
He's accused us of doing 1,000 terrible things. Most Australians now know after the last election, when they learnt they couldn't believe him, that they shouldn't take much notice of that.
And memories, it seems, are short in politics. Mr Tuckey fought a battle to rid John Howard of the leadership the first time round. Now he says he'll make an excellent Prime Minister. Peter Ryan, NBN News, late edition. When it comes to beef, 18-year-old Adam Church is an expert, not just as a butcher, but also when he wears his other hat. Earlier this year, Adam won the Australian bull riding titles at Wingham near Taree. From Kangiangi on the Central Coast, he's been riding from the age of 6, competing since he was 12. It's his love of rodeo that got him interested in his trade.
Being around beef and stuff all my life, always wanted to go into something with good products and something you can go on with.
Each weekend he travels the rodeo circuit following his sporting love, keeping an eye out for that good cut of beef.
Well, I do tend to think of that, have a look at the good cattle and the yearling beef that gets around.
Studying at the Hunter Institute of Technology, Adam is staking out his next challenge, the World Rodeo Final in South Carolina in the US next month.
Looking really forward to it. It's been a lifelong dream.
The state-of-the-art waste management centre only opened 3 months ago, but is already facing the financial scrap heap. It's losing $60,000 a week as commercial dumpers bypass the Summerhill tip for the cheaper Lake Macquarie and Maitland facilities.
About 2,000 tonnes a week are going to Maitland and Lake Macquarie, and so we're only getting about half the amount of garbage, particularly from the commercial tippers that we had expected.
The nearby Lake Macquarie tip is nearly $20 cheaper per tonne, with Maitland $8 cheaper. But a proposal before Newcastle Council last night called for the Summerhill charges to be lowered to $35 a tonne. The public has a month to respond to the proposal, which includes changes to charges for individuals.
We're concerned about tree clippings, that we're not covering the cost of mulching them, so that those charges are going to go up. But for 100% recyclables, there's no charge for a car or for a trailer.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Maitland Council has already rejected an application by the developer to put an industrial estate on this site at Thornton, despite the fact it's zoned industrial. Last night, Council rejected a compromise put forward by its own consultants to have a mixture of industrial development on the eastern side and rural residential and bushland on the western side. The Council instead favoured rezoning the western side so it can't be built on.
There's a habitat for a number of endangered species that are on an endangered species list, and I guess principally because there was a strong community perception that the bushland is significant to Maitland in terms of its location.
Developer Hilton Grujon was disappointed by Council's decision.
Sad for the business community who were behind this proposal, sad for the investment sector of the valley, and very sad for the unemployed too, because this was a huge generator of employment, potentially.
Mr Grujon says his company will take the matter to the Land and Environment Court.
We've asked the court to allow us to do industrial development on industrial zoned land.
Jane Anderson, NBN News.
That range and the top range. What are we doing? That's it. That one. How you feeling? Oh. Is it the wrong one? No, you're alright. Alright, what you want to do is let go of it, let it hang, and then lift it.
The New South Wales Cabinet yesterday endorsed a proposal to split Pacific Power into two separate and competing companies. The move has been attacked by Newcastle MP Bryce Gaudry, who wants the $12 billion company to remain as it is.
As a single entity, it's driven down the price, it's got the management, it's got the technology, and it's also got the prospect of working in the international energy market. We believe very strongly that a broken up Pacific Power will lose that capacity.
The proposal calls for the Liddell and Bayswater power stations near Muswellbrook to be amalgamated into one company. The plants at Araring, Vales Point and Munmora would combine with Wallerawang and Mount Piper near Lithgow to form a competing organisation. There is also a longer-term plan which could eventually see Araring on Lake Macquarie go out on its own to form a third company with an interstate electricity producer. While the government is hoping the scheme will be operating by March next year, it has to be approved by the Labor caucus.
I can't presume the votes that will occur in caucus. I just know that there is significant disquiet at the decision being taken by the Cabinet.
Caucus will vote on the proposal tomorrow, and if accepted, it will go to Parliament before the end of the year. Anne Lewis, NBN News.
Lithgow area of the Blue Mountains.
The Shelley Beach woman was driving towards Gosford on the Foresters Road at about 6:30 last night. Police say she lost control of her car, which spun across to the incorrect side of the road and slammed into an oncoming car. She was killed instantly. Rescue officers scoured nearby scrub when it was first thought a young child may have been catapulted from the Mazda. It was later confirmed the woman was travelling alone. The driver of the second car, a 53-year-old woman from Erina, was taken to Gosford Hospital with chest injuries, where she remains in a satisfactory condition. Police investigations are continuing. Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
Marist brother and acting director of Catholic Education, Brother Norman Hart, was today playing down the office's decision to offer voluntary redundancies to its teaching staff. He says the move is necessary because the office is accused